If there happens to be any open seats, could you please raise your hand? Excuse me? If there happens to be any open seats next to you, could you please raise your hand? Are there any open available seats? Thank you.
All right, good evening, Southport. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here. This is our first town hall ever. We would have had one much sooner, but I believe there was a pandemic that prevented all of us from being in here like this. So I'm grateful for everyone being here tonight. On our agenda, you'll see that we'll have an invocation. Normally, that is done by Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis. She could not be here with us tonight, so I will read a prayer for spring, and this will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Those who would like to join us, please stand. Prayer for spring. Lord of the springtime, Father of flower, field, and fruit, smile on us in these earnest days when the work is heavy and the toil is wearisome. Lift up our hearts, O God, to the things worthwhile, sunshine and night, the dripping rain, the song of the birds, books and music, and the voices of our friends. Lift up our hearts to these this night, and grant us thy peace. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Again, I want to welcome everyone, those here. Appreciate those of you on the porch. Y'all are front porch friends tonight. And if I'd have known we were going to have this many, we probably should have had it in an outdoor football stadium. But we're here tonight, and we're all together, and we're family and friends. This town hall is for you, the citizens. It is your opportunity to ask questions and to express your comments concerning the potential development, Indigo Plantation Phase 2. It is a time for all of us to learn more about the project as we move through this process. This is about openness, transparency, and your voice being heard. I want to thank city staff, city manager Mr. Gordon Hargrove, director of tourism Randy Jones, Director of Communications, Lisa Anderson, staff member Elena Dale, City Clerks Dorothy Dutton, Tanya Shannon, for helping to arrange this meeting. And thank you for the technology provided today. I want to thank Development Services Director, Mr. Thomas Lloyd, for his efforts on behalf of the city. I want to welcome and thank Baldhead Island Limited CEO, Mr. Chad Paul, East West Partners President, Mr. Roger Perry, and Mr. McKay Siegel from East West Partners for being here tonight. And I'd also like to recognize Representative Charlie Miller here with us tonight. Thank you for being here, Mr. Representative. And I want to thank all board members who are here tonight, and again, especially for the citizens who are taking time out of their day and their evening to be with us tonight. This is an important time. So I will move to item E. This will be the presentation by East West Partners and Baldhead Island Limited, and I'll call on the CEO, Mr. Chad Paul. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is great. I'm glad everybody came out tonight. I believe we'll have another 4 public meetings, if I'm not mistaken. So if you didn't get inside, there'll be plenty of opportunity to express your voice and give us your ideas. I wanted to make a few comments relative to the last couple of meetings we've had in terms of some of the things that I've seen in social media and make sure that we understand what it is we're all doing. First and foremost, Indigo Plantation Phase 1. I worked on that project as a 15-year-old. I personally dug the entrance footers to Indigo Plantation. My dad and the Mitchells developed the original Indigo Plantation and developed the marina. I took over as Chief Executive Officer for Bald Head Unlimited in 2010. So I've been involved in all of the development on Bald Head as CEO, as well as the balance of what's gone on Indigo for the last 12 years. That perspective is important in terms of what we're doing. Mr. Mitchell passed away 7 years ago. His estate is liquidating. That's just the nature of the beast. They're liquidating their assets. About 2 years ago, they said, hey, Chad, if you wanted to, look for a good partner that you would consider developing the balance of Indigo Plantation, Indigo Phase 2. I made one call to Mr. Perry, and we got talking, and that's where the idea was born. A couple of things. The totality of the property is about 386 acres. About 37 acres lies currently within the city limits. It pays taxes in the city limits on those 37 acres. There's roughly 350 acres that reside in the county in the ETJ. We fully know that Southport will determine how the ETJ area is developed. It's not about, hey, we can go with the county and not work with the city. No. The real fundamental crutch is, do we want that 350 acres and the homes that could be built there by right, roughly 2 times 350 is 700 homes. Do we want that to not be annexed into the city and pay property taxes? That's really fundamentally. And for me, Bald Head Island is the largest taxpayer in the city between Indigo Plantation and Deep Point. We're one of the largest employers in the city. We're one of the largest employers in the county. I have watched the infrastructure for the last 35 years. It would be irresponsible to tie into the water and sewer. We've already prepaid and have 78,000 gallons of flow on the existing 37 acres that are in the PUD, that are in the city. I would tell you it would be almost irresponsible to hook that up to the city. So what we've done is, with staff and with the county, all water and sewer will be done through the county. Those upgrades are close to $2 million. Those upgrades will be the connectivity for the city to hook up to our upgrades to tie into the county system. So that's important, because from an infrastructure standpoint, I get it. The hardest part is, how do we find a balance so that we can annex this property into the city so that we have additional tax base going forward? Fundamentally, that's really what it's about for me, because the existing infrastructure needs additional upgrading. That upgrading is on all of our backs in Southport right now. We need some kind of growth. I don't like all the development being done in the county proper areas or in other municipalities, and then coming down and using Southport's core and not paying into it. To me, that doesn't make any sense. So that's the kind of blunt, upfront thesis. The idea here is, can we come up with some mix of uses? The 350 acres had a prior owner that walked that development plan through and did get a PUD for close to 2,000 units. They built a package plant for their water and sewer on the site. That group effectively went bankrupt, and we bought portions of that property during the Great Downturn. We want to be responsible stewards. I've seen a lot of things on social media about that we're going to land clear and clear cut and grade. That's not what limited does. We've developed Bald Head for the last 40 years. There's no clear cutting, no mass grading. The existing Indigo Phase 1, there's not clear cutting and there's not mass grading. The way we're going to do this is work with the city, come up with a development agreement, and that development agreement is going to stay flat out. There is no mass grading. There is no clear cutting. The other hot issue is we're going to put in the deeds. The deeds will have my name on them, and they will be restricted. No short-term rentals less than 4 months on any residential going in there. So what we've got tonight, because of some of the other questions we have our traffic study that was submitted to the city. Jonathan's ready to go tonight to answer a lot of those questions. All of our information's available. I had a couple people come up and ask me tonight about, hey, could we go walk the property? Absolutely. Reach out to me directly, reach out to the village staff. We'll be glad to walk the property end to end with anybody that wants to walk the property and point out our ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. And now, Mr. Roger Perry, President of East West Partners.
Good evening. I'm Roger Perry with East West Partners from Chapel Hill. And first of all, let me say that we are genuinely and sincerely appreciative of you being here and the interest that you have in your community. Our goal is to go through this process and come up with a plan for development that the majority of the people in Southport and we would like to see built and implemented on this property. To reinforce what Chad said, the issue is not if it will be developed, it's how will it be developed. It by right, the way it's currently zoned, can have approximately 900 residential units. We are asking for 1,500. The question is, are there enough benefits to the city of Southport to expand that entitled 900 homes to some number above that? And at the end of the day, we don't want to do anything that the city doesn't want. I've been at this September. I will have been in this business for 50 years. And making contributions to communities and building relationships is a lot more important than anything else at my age. I encourage you to not only learn the facts about what we're proposing, but invite you to come to the Triangle and look at the type of development that we have done over the last 40 years in the Triangle. We're very proud of what we've done. We think the people who live in what we've done are happy. We think the people who live around it feel like it's an asset to the community. You're more than welcome to make that judgment on your own. Our goal tonight is not to convince you of anything. Our goal tonight is to try and set the facts and the record accurately. As Chad said, there's a lot of rumor, as there always is, and talk about what might or might not happen. We're here tonight to show you what we are proposing and the facts of what we're proposing. We're going to have a presentation by two of our consultants. The first is Eric Pullman, who's with Land Design in Charlotte, which I would suggest is the eminent land planning organization in the state of North Carolina. And Eric is a partner and one of the best and most sensitive land planners I've ever been associated with. After he makes a short presentation, Jonathan Guy will get up. Jonathan was with Kimley Horn Engineering Company, which is based in Raleigh, but has offices all over the country. They, I would submit to you, are the eminent traffic management and traffic impact analysis company in America, and I think recognized as such. And he'll make a presentation. We're open to any questions. If we can leave here tonight convincing no one of what we're proposing, but convincing everyone to raise their level of knowledge to the reality of what it is we're proposing, I'll consider this a big success. But once again, thank you very much for being here. Eric?
I'm not quite as tall as Roger, so we'll get a little bit lower. So as Roger said, my name's Eric Pullman. I'm a principal at Land Design. We are a 40-year-old company in Charlotte. We are made up of landscape architects, planners, civil engineers, and we've been doing master plans across the Southeast, across the country since the beginning. And before I go into the presentation, I did just want to sort of say, this is one of those properties that's really special. We do this, again, like I said, all over the place. This is a unique location in a unique town and has unique amenities, right? And so the way that we've gone through this master plan with the project team is an intentional plan. It's not just one size fits all. It's not we just lay down the exact same lot and run cul-de-sacs everywhere. And I hope to see that this is something that we've thought a lot about, both from an environmental standpoint, an open space standpoint, a street network standpoint, a lot size standpoint. So again, I just want to sort of hit on that. This is a special place, and we intend to create something really special there. So I'm going to sort of flip through these slides and go to the first one I want to talk about, open space. So the one thing that we know based on every place we design, every place we go, is how important open space is. Health and wellness, mental health, kids, outdoor activities, open space. That is the framework of great communities across the country and across the world. And so when we look at this site, the first thing we look at is the environmental, right? So along the southeast or southwest, you have the coastal area, the floodplain. You have two wetland fingers that run east-west through the site, which is sort of the dark gray there. So just by the nature of the land, it gives you sort of zones to develop in, right? And we'll call those little neighborhoods, right? Little hamlets that are broken in by open space. And so we said, what is the big idea that we can possibly have on this site? What is the thing that's going to attract people, residents, people from the region here? And we came up with the idea of a central park. Obviously not Manhattan scale, but a central park that is centered to the community. Homes front onto it, streets surround it. A lot of times when we see developments that don't care about active open space or open space that's front and center, it's all pushed to the outside, or it's areas that they can't develop in. This is an intentional move that we made that said, we want that to be front and center. So the dark green that's in the center is what I'm talking about of the central park. That could have stormwater pond, trails, kiosk, pavilions, active and passive recreation, kids' playground, but that is the heart of the community. You'll see the sort of lime green lines that run to the west side. When we talk about a central park, we talk about sort of the wheel and the spokes, everything should sort of emanate off of that because we want everything to connect to that. And so those are linear greens, right? So those traverse through neighborhoods and through lots. You know, the key here is we want every home to sort of be within 2 blocks of a trailhead, a pocket park that connects you to that central hub. Along the east side, you see another shade of blue and green. It's also really important that these are diverse, right? You've been to communities that's all the same thing. There's a pool, there's a playground, there's a parking lot, and a tennis court. This is about what is the land going to give us and how can we make this unique. On the east side, those two areas, the idea is preserve trees, have nature paths, have a pavilion, have maybe a dog park, have fields. Again, a little bit more natural. And again, let all of these places be something special. These photos are probably easier to see out on the table, but again, what I want to show you here, and these aren't exactly what's going to get built, but the idea is diversity of open space. And so things from active recreation of great playgrounds and great trails to the waterfront marina that could be redeveloped to have a promenade and seating and overlooking the activity that's down there, to the nature park that's about trails and greenways and all about sort of preservation of open space. The other thing that we know is that the framework of great streets usually breed great developments, right? And so you can go across the country, across the world. Great streets are something that's really important to sort of bind that community together. As you drive around Southport, it's amazing the small sort of lanes with gravel parking and some street trees, some sidewalks, but there's something really great about that from a walkability standpoint, what you see and you feel. We know developments that have really wide roadways that you could land a plane on there and no sidewalks and no street trees. That's not what's going to sort of build a great pedestrian network in somewhere you want to live out. And so the street network that we've been talking about and everything that we've sort of presented today in the zoning documents is street trees, sidewalks, on-street parking where it makes sense. And those things, even though they're very simple, seem to be very hard to develop these days. And so that framework of streets is going to be really important. At the same time, the sort of dimension between the sidewalk and the home is really important. There's not a one-size-fits-all. Not everything's front-loaded. Not everything's alley-loaded. We know that we don't want a clear cut. So the idea that you could come in and there might be a really great tree, that home gets set back. That is what creates a really great network of streets and a pedestrian-oriented environment that I think we all really want to have. So this is the bubble diagram that I think everyone has seen to this point. I think some folks have called it a heat map. We call it sort of a density transect. And what that really means is that not each of these colors that's one size of lot or that's one typology of home. The idea is that as you get closer to the core, let's call it the marina area, there's a higher intensity of development, potentially condos. There could be retail, restaurant, more activity to bring folks down. That is a public environment that we want to engage in. As you come north into the Indigo Plantation, that would be the next sort of layer of density. That could have apartments, it could have townhouses, it could have duplexes, smaller lots, bigger lots. The important piece is that that is, again, trying to get closer to the activity, closer to the environment of downtown. And then along the north and west side, as we get towards our neighbors, that's where lower intensity development would happen. There'd be more buffering along all the edges, saving of trees. But again, it's a conscious effort to say that as we sort of bleed out from the core, there's going to be a less intense development. What I think is really important as well, and we'll see it as I flip to the master plan, the great thing as you drive through Southport and some great neighborhoods across the southeast is that the sort of historic districts have a bunch of different lot sizes. You get one block that has a 35-foot lot, a really tight, skinny cottage, a big lot. That makes for a really interesting place to live and to walk. And so each of these areas, while we're talking about densities and intensities, they all might have different levels on one block of different types of homes. And I think, again, that is diversity of product, it's diversity of living, it's diversity of people, and we find that really valuable. So lastly, so this is the sort of master plan it is today. And what I want to make sure everyone understands is that this is by no means final, right? This is taking the bubble diagrams and all the things that we've done today and say, this is what it could look like, right? We want to engage everybody to have the conversation about what makes sense and what does it look like. But what you see is you take the open space pieces that we talked about, you see that central park that comes down and there might be a stormwater pond and there you can imagine activity that happens around there. You see the sort of pods and the linear greens that could connect up to the wetlands. But what's really important is that these blocks, if you look at the historic fabric of Southport, and the blocks in Southport are all grid. I grew up in Iowa. The grid is what everyone knows, right? It's easy to navigate. And so the point of what we're doing here is trying to sort of create that connected grid network where homes and green spaces are all really close to each other. You can see where potentially apartments could be, the orange on the east side, in between the two big open spaces that we want to preserve. As you get closer down to Indigo Plantation, potentially more density, which could be townhouses or duplexes. And then down at the marina, you see a few different blocks of color that could be residential, it could be retail, but potentially a little bit higher in density. So I think that's it. So I look forward to conversation later and excited to be here. So thank you. Jonathan?
Good evening. It's good to be here. I'm Jonathan Guy. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates. I've been practicing for 24 years, so I graduated in 1998. For some quick math there, I am a registered professional engineer as well as a professional traffic operations engineer. I've done more than 2,000 traffic studies over my career. I understand your concerns. I'm here to listen, I'm here to talk through, and I'm here to explain a lot of things, because a lot of times traffic studies are one of those things that you just don't understand, right? It's a lot of things that happen. So let's share some information about this. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is walk you through the process for this. We'll answer some misconceptions related to traffic studies and assumptions that might be made. So the process for a TIA is very, very long. And the time frames you see up on screen, and all this information is available for you, are the fastest that it possibly could occur. NCDOT has implemented a process to develop a traffic study that is very thoughtful, it's very focused, and it's very intentional with how it's developed and what it looks like. The first part is starting with a meeting with NCDOT and discussing the project. Now, this can be virtually, it can be in person, but it's discussing the project with them to determine if a traffic study is needed. Obviously, in this case, a traffic study is needed. So that step's pretty easy to move forward. And then you go through a process that develops the scoping package. And the scoping package really talks about what the development is, what kind of uses will be there, the horizon year of this, is there going to be any interaction with NCDOT projects that they may be building at the time frame that this is going to be built. And you start to lay the foundation for information. That information gets shipped to NCDOT and submitted and reviewed, and they make comments on that, and it comes back. We go through the comment resolution, and we finally get to a scoping package that's issued. And at that point, you would think we begin the traffic study. Well, we don't. There's a whole lot more work that has to be done as associated with this. We have to go out and collect traffic counts. In this case, we collected traffic counts not only in the summertime, because you have a tourism industry here, we also collected school counts during September. We took both of those elements, and we used that to develop the traffic model as a part of that. We understand the importance of the school. We understand the importance of the holiday festivals that go on here. All of that information goes into the traffic study. One other piece that is different from other traffic studies is that you have an active NCDOT project that's going to be looking at improving NC 211 that is going to overlap with this project. So all of that growth that was considered under that and that forecast that NCDOT did that we did not do has to be considered as a part of this as well. That'll be important as we get into the study. So then we take that information, we take the counts, and then we submit what's known as the distribution and assignment. And basically that is how traffic moves across the network. It's our understanding based on existing counts. NCDOT comes back and has the final approval of that. It's not my decision on how the traffic moves through. It's based off NCDOT's review of that information. Before you can do anything, they have to approve that. The last step that really gets implemented before we get into any real analysis is developing a program. It's a program that all traffic engineers use. It's called Synchro. And that program takes the Highway Capacity Manual, which is the document produced by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which has got a bunch of logarithmic equations and all this stuff, and basically it takes that information and it gives you output for the intersections. We had 9 study area intersections as part of this study. We programmed all 9 of those into a program. We submitted that program for review and approval. That has to be signed off before we can do any analysis. So you have to build that model, and then you have to say, NCDOT, does that model work for you? Are you comfortable with this model? Have we looked at all the elements that are important to you? To save you from going through all those elements, I'll be happy to discuss that one-on-one, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that has to be done to their standards, to their guidance. It's not things that I can change. It's not things that I can make up. It's based off of published manuals and NCDOT guidance. So after they come back and say, you're good to go, that's when the applicant or the traffic engineer can actually start doing traffic studies. So we've elapsed 2 to 3 months just getting through this point. Most likely the way they're running right now and talking with NCDOT, there's 90 traffic studies that are active right now in Brunswick County alone. So it's about 6 months through this process that we are right now since we started this, if not longer, just to get to the scoping process. It takes a lot of time. Then we start doing the operational analysis. Again, using the Synchro model that we developed before, we develop an operational analysis. We put together a draft traffic impact analysis. That information is then submitted to NCDOT along with the electronic files and any other documentation that they ask for. They run it through a program, they look at it, and they say, It either works or it doesn't work, but the review's not over yet. So you either get caught into a do loop there where they ask for additional intersections or they change information and you go back to that process and you keep going through that. Or you move forward and they say, this is something we will review. They review the traffic study, they go through the detailed review at that point, they call with any questions, and then they issue a letter of recommendation based off of the traffic study. It can be in accordance to what we recommended, or it can be completely different. It is their roads, it's their discretion. I am a traffic engineer, I might make a recommendation, they may determine that it doesn't meet their standards, or they want to see something in addition to that based off of information we may have provided. By this time, the fastest we've elapsed is 3 to 4 months. So you can see here anywhere between 5 and 7 months traditionally is what we would see to go through the process within CDOT to develop that. It is running closer to a year, if not longer right now because of that. So it takes a lot of time. So I want you to understand, and I'll be happy to talk in any of these in any greater detail, but it takes a very long time. This is not something that we sit down at a kitchen table and whip out a traffic study that says this is what we want this to say. It's a very thoughtful process that's actually controlled within CDOT with input from a lot of the stakeholders that are there. So as we look at this, there's a couple key elements, and I bring this up because my goal is to provide information. So trip generation, you might be asking, what is this? Well, the trip generation is information. This is the first step. We do this in the scoping. This basically takes what the land planner's looking at, and if he says it's going to be X number of homes, X number of commercial, all of this information is put into a manual that we have called Trip Generation by the Institute of Traffic Engineers. It comes out with a new volume about every 2 to 3 years, and they update it based off changing land uses. It's been around since the 50s, but it keeps getting updated. We're currently on the 11th edition right now. This information is calculated. NCDOT has to sign off on it. It's not me who comes up with how it's calculated. That's another important fact. NCDOT has a spreadsheet called rate versus equation. It's going to look at the rates, it's going to look at the equations, it's going to look at how this is calculated. If it doesn't follow that guidelines, it gets kicked back to us, it doesn't move forward. The trip distribution, I mentioned this before. Again, NCDOT assigns, they take the information we provide and they approve or disapprove, they make adjustments to that. The volume development, I mentioned this before. Because we have a forecasted project, which is the widening of 211, we had to look at the growth associated not only with the development and considering the build out of the development, but then taking this to the build out of that project. NCDOT requires 20 years beyond opening of their project for all forecasts. And when you do a forecast, you consider the growth of the entire area as a part of that to develop those volumes. It's going to be an important fact, number 2, to think about. Then the operational analysis, this is where the synchro files are. This is when we go through the information. We look at the analysis, it spits out information associated with level of service, delay, queues, the spacing of intersections, all of that information. And I'll show you what this really looks like here in a second. Traffic counts, I talked about this. We look at the traditional peak hours, AM and PM, midday at times. All of that information is collected. We provide that to NCDOT. If there's any sort of incidents that occur when we collect the traffic counts, we kick that information out and it has to be recounted, which can delay your project because of that. But that's one of the important factors. Internal capture. This is not really something that's too relevant with this project. I brought it up because it does have it associated with this. And it's because of the medical office that's associated with the development and a tiny fraction of the retail that's there. But basically, internal capture is the relationship between the residential, any sort of office that might be there, and retail. It's the attraction of those trips. Basically saying, hey, you might live in the neighborhood and you might need to go to the doctor, and you might go to the doctor through internal streets. Well, you didn't hit the external network, so it's an internally captured trip. That's how that calculates. That's not anything that we have too much of because we don't have a whole lot of non-residential uses associated with this. And then lastly is the study area. And the study area is the intersections that we looked at. I mentioned we looked at 9 of those intersections. Those intersections were not determined based off of what Kimley Horn thinks of or what the development or the developer thinks of. It's based off of the input from NCDOT and the town with information that they would like to see. What intersections? That helps build the model that we look at. So who determines what? This is an important factor. So a lot of people think that the developer, or in this case, the traffic engineer, might determine a lot of these factors. There's really 3 key points that the developer and or the traffic engineer gets to provide any sort of guidance on. That's the land uses, which would be your development program, the residential, the office, the build out year of the development. So when is it going to be fully built out? And then of course the phasing, if there is any phasing associated with the development. Those are the inputs that the developer gets to provide. NCDOT, the municipality, the county, and its representative agencies get to require all and review all of these things, from the TIA when it's required, the trip generation, the distribution assignment, the growth rate, how many scenarios you're looking at, what kind of mitigation you need to look at, the amount of pass-by, internal capture, all of these things. I'm not going to read them all off, but it's a laundry list of things that are really critical associated with a traffic study. This is important because it's not a manipulation of information or data. It's following guidance provided by NCDOT through this process. So what does the TIA tell us? Well, it tells us a lot of information as a traffic engineer. It tells you a lot of useful information as well as citizens. It tells you the existing conditions of the intersections, how they're operating today. It tells us what, if any, impacts there are to an NCDOT TIP project, which would be, in this case, the widening of 211. It tells us about queues, level of service, delays, points of congestion, things that we need to be looking at. Where do we see issues associated not only with an intersection, but a movement or an approach to an intersection? All of that information is relevant. The operations both before a development shows up in the horizon year and after it shows up. You need those two to compare what the impacts are going to be. And then, of course, the mitigation required by the developer. So this is how NCDOT measures impacts and mitigation. They look at level of service, whether it's A through F. Think of a report card. Level service A is great. Level service F, not doing so well in school. I will tell you, though, that the reality of roads operating at level service A, it's not a reality. NCDOT will actually tell you now that they build their roads, when they open a road up, that it's either going to be targeted at level service C or level service D. That's where we are. So just understand that. Queues. We look at 2 different types of queues from 2 different programs. There's a companion program associated with Synchro called Sim Traffic. We have to look at the 95th percentile, which means the queuing that potentially could occur 5% of the time. Not what's going to be out there on a normal day, but what may happen under 5% of the time. And that's what we're required to mitigate against, as well as the potential max, which is the culmination. And getting into a lot of detail, it's basically combining the 50th percentile and the 95th percentile is really how that's calculated. And so that information is used to determine if there's any queues. Delays, we talked about this, not only at the intersection, but the approach and certain movements. All of that has to be looked at. And then turn lane warrants, which is something that is not based on capacity that you would think of. It's actually based off of a graph that's in the back of the driveway manual. It's a NOMA graph, and you can look at it. You can plot the volumes out there, and it has nothing to do with the capacity of the intersection. It's basically looking to say, I've got this amount of through volume. It's opposed against this left turn lane. Probably should have a turn lane there at that location. All of that analysis was done as a part of this. The turn lane warrants, though, I will say, it is not done for signalized intersections because you use capacity analysis for that, but unsignalized intersections, you look at turn lane warrants. There's a couple common misconceptions, and I'm wrapping up so that we can get to the Q&A, but a lot of things that happen with a traffic study, this is very common, and I hear this, and just, you know, to explain my background, in a lot of communities in North Carolina, I actually serve as the traffic engineer for communities, so I get a lot of residents who will come up and ask, why are we looking at it from this standpoint? Is the developer manipulating the numbers? And the reality of that is, in North Carolina, it is impossible to do that, because of the protocols that have been set in place by NCDOT to do a traffic study. That process, which was the very first slide, all of those things are the checklist and process you have to go through. The data is required. There's very little that the traffic engineer, and I showed you the 3 points that we put into that really is going to change an outcome. NCDOT has developed this process to protect communities so that the information is looked at. And we as engineers actually prefer this method because it helps us through that process. It's a very rigid process. It makes it easier for us to do our analysis because we know exactly how the analysis needs to be done to their standards. And the second one is that a TIE can be manipulated to show a favorable outcome. Well, again, that's false. Again, it goes back to the protocols that are set in place. The results are the results that are implemented. Impacts are shown. I will say, though, that the way NCDOT does this, there are factors that go into a traffic study that are not how your intersections are going to operate every single day. And I use this as an example to explain that. And NCDOT has a very good reason in their mind for doing this. They want to show the worst case scenario. That's their goal with doing a traffic study. Tell me how bad it could really be if I constrain you to this point. So a lot of intersections you pull up to, think of an intersection that's got a traffic signal, and you are allowed to turn right on red unless it is prohibited, correct? You'll see the sign up there, and you obey the laws, of course, and you sit there if you're prohibited from turning. But most intersections, because we try to maintain sight lines within the state, you've got good sight distance, you look, there's no traffic coming, you're able to go. When we do a traffic study for NCDOT, one of the restrictions is that we can't allow right turns on red. Well, that is a factor that creates more congestion, okay? So that's one of the things that's in there. Another thing, you've probably seen some implementation of signals around here, either with what we'll call a green arrow. So if you're in the left turn lane, you'll get the green arrow. Sometimes you'll see flashing yellow arrows, correct, that allow you to go permissively. You don't have to have the arrow to go, to turn left in a lot of cases. NCDOT requires us to look at it where you are only allowed to go, even if it's not in the field restricted, that you have to sit there until you get the green left turn arrow. So those two factors alone have a lot of congestion built into doing the analysis. The last thing that I'll say about this study in particular that's important is that I mentioned the traffic study looked at the TIP project that's being built on 211 that comes down to Robert Roark. So when NCDOT does that, I mentioned this, that they look at a forecast, they go 20 years out when it's going to open up, and they consider the growth of the community there, and they use that to forecast the volumes. In this case, what we were required to do is say, take the forecasted volumes, and then add our trip generation on top of that. So when you do the forecast here, and you consider the growth of Southport, which this property, because it was already rezoned, we had talked about this earlier, considered the property built out. Okay? So now we come in to do a traffic study, we've got that volume that's already there, then we add our volume on top of that volume. So in this case, it's a very conservative analysis for the congestion and delays that will be out there because of those things that I just mentioned and the compounding of traffic volumes associated with the forecast as well as the trip generation for the development. All of that is just to give you that understanding of that. So the last thing that I'll say, this is the reality, and I'm not going to read all this, but every aspect of a TIA is controlled by NCDOT and or the municipality that might be involved with a project, whether it's the county, whether it's the town or the city, whether it's even other state agencies. NCDOT has a very rigid process. Please go look, go do the research yourself. If you question what I'm telling you, there's a lot of resources on NCDOT's website. You can look at the TIA guidelines up there. You can look at the driveway manual. You can look at the rate versus equation. They publish everything, which I will tell you in working in other states, they're not as, NCDOT is very, very good about providing the information and making a very transparent process from that standpoint. So that is my last slide. Who am I turning this back over to? Chad? Fantastic.
Couple of things before the mayor can open for questions that I want to follow up from Eric's presentation. So call it 900, 950 residential units that can be built now. We're asking for 1,500. Part of that is the stewardship of, do we want to have affordable housing? Do we want to have apartments? If we do, that needs to go into the count. Do we want to have an assisted living facility where you can basically buy a house in phase 2 or phase 1 or anywhere else in Southport and age in place and go to an assisted living facility? Those facilities are 100 to 150. Apartments would be 100 to 200. So right there is 350. So let's keep in mind what you all want to do. It'll be ultimately the decision of the town on what you want. Maybe you don't want that. As it relates to DOT and traffic, independent of this development, we own 2 pieces of property which we have indicated to both DOT and to the city that we will incorporate in these discussions. Those 2 pieces of property are the intersection of 211 and 133 across the street from Truist, the old BB&T. The 3.5 acres, we own that. We've already had a condemnation hearing with DOT. We've already given them some land. We've agreed to basically let them lease that for 4.5 years to work on all the things they need to do. If it makes sense for the town to get involved or the county to get involved with DOT as it relates to that intersection, utilizing some of that property, we're open to that conversation. The other piece of property that we own that is not a part of this is we own the lot on the corner of Howe and 9th. We used to have our old HR office there. Some of you remember at Bald Head, that's where our human resources office used to be. That property now is leased. We leased that to Dozier Hospital for $1 so that they can get access to the health care across the way there. That intersection, we all know that intersection is headed down to the school. That piece of property could be used to do something, maybe a turning lane, do something like that. The other part of the development is, yeah, there's 80,000 potential square feet of commercial. From our perspective, the majority of that commercial is some kind of medical use. We all know that Dozier is landlocked. There's not a whole lot of opportunity for that. So the idea is, can we use some of that commercial space to create some offsite outpatient medical to create that doctor's office to allow those folks to keep going? So those are just some of the other items to keep in mind as we're working through this, and we really want to hear everybody's ideas. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Paul, and those were excellent presentations, and I hope we've all learned something from that. I think this will help you to generate questions and hopefully see the larger scope. I know I've learned from listening and made notes, and all of this should be on our website. You should be able to access it. You should be able to watch this meeting and learn more about it. So the next part of our town hall is the question and answers and public comments. So Madam Clerk, if you would call the first name, please, and thank you, Mr. Lloyd, for moving that so our citizens can speak. So thank you.
Shirley Sullivan.
Welcome, Ms. Sullivan. If you just give us your address, name and address.
(5002) Seaward Court in Southport. Okay, I was doing a lot of reading on this whole Indigo Plantation, and I read a review that was written in 1992 about Southport. It's an authentic community with school buses, college students, working families, instead of planned communities of look-alike houses. Quiet streets instead of congested mall parking lots. Changing seasons rather than endless summers, and a chance to stand out and be different rather than blend in with the other retirees. Also low to moderate cost of living. I think we can all agree that's changed a bit. The current zoning was for 500 homes, approximately 1,000 more residents. If we rezone, that would allow for 1,500 single and multifamily units, approximately 3,000 more residents or more over the next 8 to 10 years. The population in 2010 was 2,700. It is now over 4,000, a 50% growth over 12 years. Have we managed that very well? Do we have the infrastructure to support 1,500 more homes? Electric, sewage, water? Let's see. Even in the off-season, it can be hard to find a parking space downtown. I don't know what's going to happen next. I haven't had a chance to read the 400-page traffic study yet. I appreciate all of the information I learned tonight of what goes into it. I don't know when I'll be able to read it, though. That's a lot. But what is considered a rush hour? We are not your typical 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. town. You can find traffic anywhere from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. heading into Southport, and leaving Southport traffic slows down in the afternoon. I've seen it 2, 3, 4. I'm sure that'll probably be covered in the traffic study. Phase 1 came in 1993, originally developed by Bald Head Island Limited. I'm not sure how many homes, 100 homes and townhomes. The marina is not currently part of the POA, but it's part of Bald Head Island, Inc. Is that going to stay the same if you build a new property, you know? Is that going to stay the same? Is the marina, the new marina, also going to be owned and operated by Bald Head, or is it going to be part of?
It's going to be part of the partnership. So the 37 acres that includes the marina, that is currently zoned PUD, that's in the city limits, that will be incorporated into this plan. So all of the current density that we have down there will be incorporated in part of the density here in the total of 1,500. So right now, the PUD's 37 acres, it's roughly 6 units, so it's roughly between 200 and 222 units to include things in and around the marina. If you recall, ma'am, that was the original demarcation point for the ferry system. So the areas that are in the city limits are in fact the old parking lots that were there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Yes. Next, Madam Clerk.
Jim Lightbourne?
Welcome, Mr. Lightbourne. And we do have a 3-minute limit. I know this unlimited at the Board of Aldermen meeting, but for the town hall is a 3-minute limit, so we can have as many people speak and ask questions as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Am I live? Oh, yes. My name is Jim Lightbourne. Sharon and I live at 316 West Street here in Southport. I've not formed a position on this development at this stage, but I am concerned we're not all working from the same assumptions. So I'd like to go through a few of those assumptions. Actually, our presenters have already spoken to some of those already. So assumption 1, I've heard an assumption that the annexation would be a financial benefit to the city. I agree there'll probably be an initial sugar rush with an increased tax base. I agree the developer, while in play, will contribute to this. But what will happen in the longer run is less clear to me. We know annexations often do not improve a municipality's financial revenue expenditure ledger. In some cases it can, but for those circumstances, those don't necessarily apply to Southport. For example, Southport, as far as I know, doesn't have an excess capacity in public services to help with this cause. Now, Mr. Paul spoke to this a little bit about infrastructure. So I think this is an area we need to work on to be sure that this has a financial benefit to Southport. I haven't seen the analysis yet that convinced me that that will be the case. Assumption 2, the traffic analysis and its scope is adequate. That's an assumption. I really question this assumption. I sympathize with you with the arduous process that you had to go through. But this analysis was limited to only a few streets. No mention is made on the impact on the neighborhood streets and the cut-through traffic. I read through the 400-page, or at least skimmed through it. Do we really think folks driving from Indigo to downtown Southport will follow 9th Street to House Street? I don't think so. I wouldn't do it. I'd get on 9th Street, I'd look and see how things are going, I'd cut through on Burrington, Clarendon, Caswell, or Lord. Also, as the intersection on Howe and Robert Rourke begins to back up, so if you're coming from the east on 87, more people will cut through on, was it Rob Gandy or Jabbertown, and then work their way through. I already do that, and it's going to be compounded at that intersection. Plus, when Howe Street was blocked, we saw in spades that our residential areas cannot handle increased traffic. I didn't see the traffic analysis speak to that issue. Our roads are too narrow. We don't have any sidewalks. Well, we have some. And those roads, our roads, are not built even to handle the current loads. They just break down.
Mr. Lightbourne, 3 minutes are up. So
Thank you.
Appreciate those comments. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Karen Reif.
Welcome, Ms. Reif.
Hello. All right, some of the points have already been made, and I'm not going to try to belabor anything. My name is Karen Reif, and I live at 5980 Dutchman Creek Road in Indigo Plantation. We have owned property in Indigo since its conception back in the early 90s. So to Mr. Paul's point, we bought our property. We knew that those lots were going to be developed. So I have no problem with that. My question, one of them, because of what you just said, on the map, it says the marina 150 plus or minus units, correct? You just stated 200 to 220.
What we have right now, so outside of this, there's 37 acres that is
Right.
primarily the marina and those 4
Parking lots.
Parking lots. We can build 222 units on those 4 lots today. What we're saying is, hey, look, let's put that in the pool and spread it out with everything else to get to that. So those 222 are in the 1,500.
Okay. Was or what is a complete environmental impact study of this project? We know we have a very fragile ecosystem here. Living in Indigo, we've seen what happens with water runoff, stormwater runoff. It's not productive. I mean, we've got some problems. So now you're going to add even just the little part that's in Indigo, you're going to add more to that. So that's one question I have. Then topographical map. What does this look like? You showed something sort of, but all those green spaces, are you bringing in fill dirt to make those parks? Or are they already flat spaces that you're just going to clear whatever trees you decide are proper to make those work? And then, again, the roads, they're going to get torn up no matter what. Does the city have the money to fix the roads that are going to be torn up that belong to the city? And does the state have the money going forward, now and forward, to fix the roads that are going to get destroyed by all the development? So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paul, would you like to
Sure.
answer?
So we do not believe that there will need to be lots of aggregate that will need to be brought in to that site. If most of you know, in the D lot, we did put a lot of sand there that we ended up using after Hurricane Florence to rebuild the spillway bridges for the Brunswick nuclear plant. But we don't believe, Ms. Wright, that there will be lots of aggregate brought in. In terms of roads that get torn up, if we tear them up, we got to fix them. In the prior session, there was a conversation about where would we start. What I would suggest would be is we would probably start down at the marina and work our way out, notwithstanding we're not going to have all these trucks rolling in and all this equipment rolling in. We will create a centralized staging area within the development so it can work off within the development where it's not going to be burdensome to anyone like that. In terms of a topo map, the site in the area is pretty flat right now. In terms of its percolation, it's mostly sand, so it does well. All the stormwater would have to be signed off by the state. So whatever the plan says has to be signed off by state stormwater. I would suggest in terms of the stormwater that we have, we would actually have extra. So I know Mr. Poppy's here, and I know you're aware because we signed your deed when you first bought your house. Stormwater management within Indigo right now, we have worked with Indigo Plantation property owners to basically take our excess and give it to them for their management on that. Let's see here. I think that was everything. Was that everything, ma'am?
From y'all, any further comments on any of those questions? Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Rebecca Kelly.
Okay, welcome, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I'm Rebecca Kelly. I reside in Indigo Plantation at 5971 Dutchman Creek Road. I grew up at 6014 Dutchman Creek Road. So I have lived in Indigo Plantation for the majority of my life. I have a couple of questions for you, and I'm really thankful that you're here today as the traffic engineer because we did have a number of questions at the last Alderman meeting. According to the 400-page traffic study, page 84 said that the traffic study was done between 8 and 9 in the morning, 11:30 and 12:30, and 4 and 5 in the afternoon. You referenced that briefly during your presentation as well. I didn't see any note of time between 3 and 4 when the school is actually being let out and the traffic is backed up on 9th Street. So that might be something to look at, and I would certainly like your input on that. I also have a question just to, I guess, to East-West. What do you intend to do with the coal ash on the old football fields from the Cogenics in the old Stevens Park? I was told this evening that it's still there, and if you dig down about a foot, you'll know exactly where it is, and that needs to be further investigated. The property at the corner of 9th and Howe, currently leased to Dozier for $1, is wonderful for Dozier Hospital, but doesn't really help us as the general populace in Southport. So the traffic that is going on 9th Street, unless you're going to give up that property and make that an additional turn area, that would really be the only benefit I see to us as Southport residents there. And that's the exclusion of my questions.
So that's the idea. Notwithstanding, we wouldn't want to dislocate Dozier's access to their medical office across the way. But the idea is if it made sense to have a turning lane there, that property would be available to do that with, even though it's not part of the proper here. It's, again, it's adjacent to, but it's not part of this development. But that would be something that we could do, just like the property at 211 and 133. In terms of the what would be the old Stevens Park property, there is about 7.5 acres ballpark that's owned by the city. That's landlocked there. It's actually, there's a small fence across the street from the school where that property is. There is some additional property that Limited owns, where the coal ash was used to seed the old football field. So in the 70s and the 80s, when they seeded a lot of those fields, throughout the county, they use the coal ash because the grass likes to do that. In terms of where that is, there's currently no plan to build any houses on that at all. We're working collaboratively with the city on their 7.5 acres, plus the land that's impacted by the coal ash owned by us. But right now, there's no plan there. One of the ideas is you could use that and make that a park. We can make that a park that's accessible to everybody, put more tennis courts. We know that to try to get a tennis court here.
I'm sorry, so you want to put a park on top of the current coal ash instead of remediating it?
In terms of remediation, the state, we're working with the state fully on that. The state does not recommend and will not. We're part of the brownfields. We're working with them on the brownfields. They absolutely are opposed to any kind of remediation there. They think what you should do is basically cap it a little bit more and turn it into something that the city can use.
So we're going to put our kids' park on top of the coal ash?
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is,
I just wanted to make sure I was
Ms.
understanding.
Kelly, I'm just suggesting the state has a process for that. We didn't put the coal ash there. That's not what we did. The coal ash, the city didn't put the coal ash on its stuff. and the county didn't put its coal ash on the current football fields within the county. So in terms of what the state decides to do, we'll do, but that's not part of what we're all talking about today. We're not going to have any residences built there. We can turn into open space. We can leave it as is. But right now, the state's recommendation is to not touch it in terms of digging it up or remediating it.
Okay, thank you. And then on the 9th Street,
Thank you for your 3 minutes. 9th Street, you want to ask that last, but your minute,
Sure.
3 minutes are up.
Sure, that's a great question about the traffic counts associated with that. So the peak hours were determined, as I said, with NCDOT. We know that the school has been brought up in a lot of the conversations and feedback that we've heard. It's something we're taking very seriously. We'll look at that. I know there's been some discussions about access through there, how that access point might be. And so all of that needs to be considered as we move forward with this. But it's something certainly that we will continue to look at as we move forward with this.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Frank Poplars.
Mr. Poplars.
I'm Frank Poplars, 1023 Captain Atkins Drive, Southport, otherwise known as Smithville Woods. I'm going to answer a couple questions that were raised by the people who have already spoken. One, first of all, is to understand that this project has an economic impact as well as a growth impact. The economic was brought up by the fellow over there talking about the impact of the taxes and so on. So I've used Bald Head Island's information and also the city's 2021 budget to come up with these numbers. So if you're going to argue them, you're going to argue with yourself. First of all, the budget for the city of Southport, operating budget for 2021 was $8 million. That's for 3,900, almost 4,000 people. The tax revenue on that was $1.9 million. The rest is made up on whatever sources of revenue they have. If we develop, or if they develop the project as stated, they'll add 5,000 people to that. That's 125% more than the current population. So if you take the $8 million and multiply it by 125%, you get $12 million. Based on their development costs, they're in a neighborhood of, let me look at my numbers, a little over $700 million. So the tax rate currently at that $707 million would be $2.2 million of additional tax revenue. If the budget was necessary to cover those 5,000 people was $12 million, then that means there's a shortfall of almost $9 million. Well, $12 million is ridiculous. First of all, we're not going to have 2 mayors. We're not going to have 12 aldermen. But just say it's $6 million. Subtract 2.2 million from 6, and you're talking a neighborhood of $3,800,000. So where do you make it up? If you increase everyone here, as well as those coming forward, for their tax rate to make that balanced budget for $6 million, everybody's tax rate would go up 0.225 per 100. Got that? Almost 70% what you're paying now. Or you cut back on services. Option 2. Those are your 2 options. So from an economic standpoint, answering your question, it's not good. Not good at all. Now, dealing with the growth side of it, you take Project Indigo and you take Osprey. When they're fully developed, there'll be 5,600 new residents. Add that to the current population, you'll have 9,600 in 10 years. Can the city's infrastructure deal with that? Those questions were raised by everyone else that's come up here. Can we deal with a population of almost 10 million people, 10,000 people, 10 years from now? If you just look at Robert Ruark, there will be, the current population there with all the subdivisions is about 1,500. If you add Osprey Landing, that's another 700 or 800. You add Project Indigo, you have another 5,000. 7,000 people are going to be coming out of Robert Ruark. The whole population is 9,600. 7,000 are going to come to that intersection. Why is that the only way in and out of that whole area? Okay, you can have all the studies in the world you want, but think about 70% of your population is going to come out of one area. One stop sign, which is stoplight, which is currently the most active and busiest intersection of all Southport already.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, yes.
I feel compelled to respond to that.
Yes, absolutely.
That was absolutely as fast and loose with facts as you could possibly get, very little of which is true. The number of people that will be generated if we built 1,500 total homes would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,000. That's the max. The amount of tax that would be generated through the hospital tax and the ad valorem tax just for the city would be $3 million. The tax that would be generated for the county will be another $3.7 million for a total of about $6.5 to $7 million in tax money. The amount of traffic was grossly overstated. Look at the traffic study. First of all, we're not talking about. First of all, we're talking about less than half the number of people suggested, or about half. And the traffic counts. The traffic study is science, folks. It ain't art. It's not interpretive. It is absolute. It's science. You can choose to ignore. You can choose to ignore the facts if you so desire. But I feel compelled. That absolutely had more false information in it than I've heard to date.
All right, we will have our city staff. This seems traffic is obviously the biggest, one of the biggest issues, and we certainly will have city staff. I mean, when someone's talking, we should really listen. We're hospitable. We listen. We speak one at a time. That type of thing. And if we disagree, that's fine. Absolutely. But let's. Mr. Hargrove, if you would have city staff look at this carefully along with the traffic engineers and the document that Mr. Poplars has, if he would submit the full document, and anyone who has spoken tonight, please submit your full document to the city. And in particular, we will look at that. We want to look at this. We're going to work through this. And it's very important. That's why we're all here. That's why we're here. To work through this process and to express yourselves, and we will continue to do so. So we will look at the traffic and the different times and the volume and the population estimates and things like that. Madam Clerk.
David McCaddy.
Hello, I'm Dave McCaddy at 205 East West. I didn't put together a prepared speech, but I have some friends that live in the area, of Indigo and the area of Robert Rourke, and they're very concerned with the traffic is number one. But the main thing I wanted to bring up right now is I feel like we heard a lot of sales presentation on how this would be good. Well, you know what? That's good for the people buying. New parks, great for the people buying, not for the people that live here. We're not going to go to those parks. That's corny. We're not going to go to those parks. The other thing, I just didn't hear enough about how it benefits the current residents. Seriously, how this is not benefiting us. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an investor. One of the things that's hot right now we know is real estate. Real estate's great. I don't think I've heard enough about how the city itself, too. I'm not just saying the developers. I know this is hard to do, but how are you going to spend money on the core? Like you guys said, actually, I put down the words. We need to grow Southport's core. we need commercial building, restaurants, bars, personal shopping, rentals that are for the local people, not, you guys, oh, this is cool, you're building a cute little marina, and I can go eat there. I don't think I'm going to do that. I want to see more personal growth within the city, like maybe the city or you guys work together to build some commercial. Maybe it's a little cheaper price so that someone can rent it and build a cool local business. It seems like it's just too much about what you guys can do for you and the city, but it's really, I'm not hearing enough about what it does for the local people here. And I'm against it. I think most of these people here are not for it. I mean, if you already did some huge studies years ago in the 90s for 900 homes, that even sounds like a lot. Making it 1,500, come on, that's just too much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Madam Clerk?
Opal Gray Bomer.
Welcome.
In last week's Stateport pilot, Chad Paul was quoted saying, "We want this to be a process where everybody has a voice." What about the voices of the animals that are already inhabiting this forest? What are you doing for conservation in regards to animals, plants, and their habitat? Have you checked with the EPA about endangered animals?
The question is about the animals, Mr. Paul.
Yes, so a couple of things. We've already discussed how we will manage all of the lighting. We'll follow basically what we do on Bald Head. All lighting will be shielded, so it all deflects down. So anything related to the marine estuaries areas won't be whited out. In terms of the mass of this development, we have lots of continued green space there. In terms of what would be permitted there to be able to go. Let's see here. In terms of the stewardship of the land, there's no mass grading. So we've already done a tree survey. If we go out there and we're laying down a road, it'll be just like on Bald Head. If for some reason the engineers missed it and there's a 400-year-old oak tree, well, the road's going to get moved just like we do on Bald Head. If you've been out on Bald Head, you take a ride down those roads, they go zig and zagging in every which way. Why? Because we're not going to cut down 400-year-old oak trees. We're just not going to do that. So the road will get moved before the trees get torn down.
It's a good question. I think there ought to be an understanding of something. We're pretty good at what we do, but no one is going to move to Southport in Brunswick County just so they can live in our community. It ain't going to be that good. The people are coming. They're coming. The question is, how do you manage them? How do you accommodate them? Where do you put them? Is it better to put them in a compact, dense location, or is it better to spread them out across the countryside and have lower and lower density, but have the total number of people, and because of that lower density and because of that spreading out, you lose far, far more habitat in the general region by developing low density than you do by developing high density and with compact development. So the question is, the people are coming. If you don't believe that, you got your head in the sand. They're coming. The question is, how do you accommodate them? We found that you end up with a lot more open space, a lot more habitat if you concentrate the people in a smaller area. And so we think that ecologically, from a fauna standpoint, the kind of development we're talking about makes much, much more sense than low density development.
with all the destruction, what about the animals?
I just told you that compact development is friendlier to animals than low-density development, much friendlier to animals. So I would suggest to you that the kind of development we're talking about protects animals in the overall ecosystem far, far better than if you take and spread people out over more and more land and destroy more and more habitat. So that's how this kind of development is very positive for animals.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I have a soft spot for the animals
Yes.
as well. There are a lot of things that you can do in development that require just a little bit more thought than is typically employed. You've seen here that we have 75 acres of open space trails, another 65 acres of undisturbed wetlands. So of the 375 acres, 140 of it is meant to be undisturbed. Now, you can do thoughtful things with that. You can be considerate about where the trails go, especially routing trails around open spaces so that more habitat is undisturbed. Animals don't like to see people, fun fact. As well, you can be thoughtful about how lighting is designed, especially at night. I think Southport is moving into a dark skies program, which is one of the best things that you can do. Also, Southport, as I understand it, has a cat program. You guys, if I'm reading the crowd right, are going to laugh at this, but one of the biggest threats to North American bird species is all of your cats that run around outside. Yeah. So there are things that you can do to think through that, and I agree we need to think about it.
Thank you, young lady.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
would you or have someone from your staff take a moment to talk about the two economic and utility and infrastructure studies that the city has commissioned to understand the economic and infrastructure impact of this development? I don't think that's evidently that's not very well known.
We can do that. Mr. Hargrove, who would you like to speak? Mr. Lloyd, would you take that? Come on up then, young man.
I'll come.
Okay, so I can speak on that. So the city is working in concert with the developer, matching 50-50 to do two studies to review and analyze this project as it results from an infrastructure standpoint as well as from a fiscal impact standpoint on the city's general fund. So the first study is a fiscal impact analysis, and that is being done by a group out of Chapel Hill, or actually I think it's Research Triangle, but they're a nationwide group. Development Planning and Financing Group. Lucy Gallo is spearheading that study, and she is also working with a instructor at the UNC School of Government, and he is assisting her with that study. That study will look at the proposed, or what the proposed development would do to the city from a fiscal impact on the city's general fund in particular. It would also look at, impacts to our fire district as well. From an infrastructure analysis standpoint, we're working with Withers Ravenel. They are a nationwide engineering firm, and they're developing a model to show us how this development will impact all of the existing infrastructure. So, we're looking at street conditions, we're looking at sidewalk conditions, as well as water and sewer to develop this model. And we are working, collaboratively with the developer to do that. They are providing inputs, we are providing inputs for that model. We've been meeting, every 2 weeks to go over this with Withers and Ravenel. We believe that the model and their report will be completed in early April. So we will certainly share that information with everyone once we have it. Early April. I meant early May. I'm sorry. So the city is paying for 50% of it, and the developer is paying for 50% of it. Yes. So the scope of that study is not just reviewing Indigo in particular, but it's taking in all of the city's infrastructure, not just that infrastructure, not just the infrastructure that Indigo would impact. It is taking in everything as a whole. I believe that the total amount, I think, is it around 40,000 for the Withers Ravenel study? And then the DPFG is 20,000. 28, sorry. The DPFG study is including the current zoning as a baseline, and it is also including the development as it would be proposed. So it's both. Gordon, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Siegel, do you have anything else you would like to add to that? Anyone? Good. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Madam Clerk.
Jim McKee.
Welcome, Mr. McKee, from the historical perspective.
There we go. First off, a question for y'all, and thank you for your time this evening. How long have y'all lived in Southport?
I don't currently reside in Southport, but I have been involved in Southport for almost 35 years.
Okay. Anyone else live in Southport? Okay. That's all I need. That's the only question I had right there. I live here. I've been here 30 years. I remember when Indigo was started. I remember when a lot of the stuff over on Baldhead was done. I pretty much know Baldhead's track record. You know, we've talked about animals. We talked about how it's going to impact the people living here. What we haven't talked about is the impact to the dead. I know where the old graveyard, the old African-American graveyard was on Baldhead. It's under one of the greens. And there's one underneath, almost underneath the swimming pool at Indigo. Who's going to be looking out for General Statutes 149 and General Statute 70-26 through 70-33, which oversees the desecration of graves? And there are some out there.
We've dealt with grave sites in many of our projects. We understand the law about what you have to do to protect them and to deal with them. I can assure you we've got 50 years of doing that, and we'll do so here as well.
Yeah, but I know, you, like I said, your track record over at Baldhead and at Indigo isn't good, because I can show you where the graveyard over there has been pretty chewed up over the years by development. And you've got to find the bloody things first. So who's going to be doing your cultural resource study? I know the state's going to require it.
Have an expert like all of these we have here to do that. We've done that many times before too. We're not new at this.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I know that.
I've been at it 50 years. We built a hell of a reputation for being responsible. We will be here as well.
Okay. The other thing is, Why should residents, taxpayers, citizens here let someone outside dictate how we're going to live our future? Could this be something that could be brought up to a vote by the people? Something to consider. Yeah.
May. If we were going to dictate the future of this city, we wouldn't have bothered to come here tonight. We're here because the city of Southport, we're asking the city of Southport to rezone us. As I said a week before last, the city of Southport has no obligation whatsoever to rezone us. They can live with we can live with the existing zoning, and we can build a project there. The question is what we're proposing in your better interest than what is currently allowed in the best interest of the owner of the land. That's what we're talking about here. And I'd like to make sure that everybody understands that that's the way it's framed. We can't build 1,500 homes. We can't dictate that. You've got to agree that that's the better way to do it and bring it into the city than building 900 homes and leaving it in the county. Those are the options. There are no other options. Those are the two options.
But we can't even handle 900 more people.
What?
We can't even handle 900 more people with the way the roads, the infrastructure, and everything else is. And even with the improvements that were promised, grade C, grade D for the roads from the get-go. So something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Donna Parisi.
That would like to take a seat from someone who's left, you're certainly welcome to do so.
Hi, I'm Donna Parisi. I live at 5992 Gray Squirrel Path in Turtlewood, the kind of forgotten subdivision. With your impact studies of the traffic, has anybody given thought to how much of a mess the ferry traffic's going to be? We right now average between 25 cars every half hour when the ferries are going and the traffic is here for tourists. They come straight down our road. We have speed bumps. We have stop signs. Chief Coring has been awesome at helping us, but they catapult over the speed bumps, they roll through the stop signs, and so that presents a very big problem. Our roads collapse. We've had 4 repairs. I've only been in the subdivision going on 5 years. I'm the president of the HOA. I get all the complaints from all the residents. I do know that we have to think about that traffic impact has to be dealing with the outer parts of the city. We are the city of Southport, and we kind of get forgotten. Thank you, Chief Coring, for helping us so much that you have. I guess I wanted to basically say that this is part of the traffic stuff that we have to adjust to. The reduction of speed on, I know it's North Carolina's DOT, on Leonard and on Moore Street. I will tell you that nobody stops, well, no, I can't lie. 3/4 of the people do not stop at the stop signs. Once we add larger traffic, more people that are going to go to the ferry, to go to Carolina Beach, Curie Beach, Bald Head Island, and all of the other outside parts that they go on the ferry is going to cause a very big problem. So I'm wondering what you're going to do to help us with our ferry traffic. We come off right. I see that you have things based on certain streets like Stewart and 9th, but we get the bulk of the ferry traffic, always. They come through us. So I'm just wondering what is going to be some kind of resolve to that. Do you have, and is that in the traffic impact study?
It's a good question. So the traffic impact study does consider the ferry traffic that would have been picked up in the peak hours, which are the highest points of congestion on the roadway. The specific intersections that you mentioned were not included in the traffic study. It's something we can look at and see
We're
if
the
there's
forgotten
something.
subdivision, so I can almost guarantee you don't even know where we are. Guarantee you.
Having grown up at least half of my childhood in Curie Beach, I've ridden the ferry numerous times on my bike, and I have been through your subdivision before. I've taken my kids here, so I do know.
yeah.
I do know the area. I will say that compliance a lot of times with speed bumps and with stop signs, that's always one of the frustrating things that you have to deal with in a neighborhood, right? We see that quite often throughout North Carolina and other places, and sometimes it's because it's, and I'm not saying this is the case, sometimes it's placed in the wrong place, sometimes it may not be visible, or sometimes people just don't care.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Well,
that's the case.
Yeah, I can vouch for not caring. The subdivision itself has had 7 homes. When I started there 4.5 years ago, we're now up to 42 with children, and I will say the impact study has to be addressed because we're going to lose a kid, because that's how bad it is. And that's all I have to say. Bye.
Just say one thing. Your Turtlewood is not forgotten. I was there 10 days ago, had a delightful visit with a gentleman. He had 3 daughters. We were talking about the speed calming devices. He told me I needed to come talk to you, and I will as HOA, so I'll look forward to coming to see you. All right, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Jim Gandy.
My name is Jim Gandy. I live at 5961 Spike Rush Trail in Indigo Phase 1. I'm going to talk very quickly about some numbers. The developer is proposing 1,542 residential dwellings compared to only 120 currently in Indigo Phase 1. The question is does the town of Southport have the infrastructure to support this development? While the sewer and water and electrical infrastructure may be expanded, what can't be expanded is our roads. The fact of the matter is our roads are going to be the same 10 years from now as they are today. So taking a matrix of 2 vehicles for every residence, if you have 1,542 new residents, that's going to be over 3,000 more cars added to Southport. And specifically, if you take what the developer says they're going to do at Marina Village, 188 residential units, 581 residential units in the residential core area, all of which will access Indigo Drive. That's going to be over 1,500 more cars accessing Indigo Drive than what currently do. If you take the number 2 vehicles for the 120 homes that exist right now, that's only 240 vehicles. That's 6 times more the number of vehicles that will be accessing Indigo Drive. That not only impacts Indigo Drive, that impacts 9th Street. As Ms. Kelly stated earlier, we already have a problem on 9th Street when the school's in session. I can tell you for sure, between 3:30 and 3:50 in the afternoon, traffic's normally backed up to Burrington Street. If you're trying to get into Indigo at that time with traffic coming out from the school, there's no right-of-way to get around. You have about a 5 or 10 minute time period in which you have no way to get into Indigo. That's a problem already. If there's a medical emergency, a house on fire in Indigo at that point, there's a serious problem. So, and I can tell you also that in 2017, my wife had an accident coming out of Indigo from traffic in the school, trying to turn into the school to drop off a student. She was T-boned, our minivan was totaled, and she had a serious neck injury. She had to have surgery to prevent from future paralysis. What I would ask of the planning board and the board of aldermen is to take these numbers seriously before you make any decisions about this development. To be sure, this proposed new development is a game changer for Southport. The question is it a good game changer or a not so good game changer? My own personal opinion is such a major game changer that every citizen in Southport should have an opportunity to say yea or nay to this proposed development. But that's up to the elected officials of this town. Whatever the final decision is, we wanted the biggest, if not the biggest decision ever made in the history of this town. Without exaggerating, that is the magnitude of what's at stake for this town. This decision will change the future of what this town looks like, the safety on our streets, and the lifestyle that beckons people to make Southport their home. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Gandy. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Cole Ward. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Ward, thank you. Thank you for being here. Madam Clerk?
Kathy Cabral.
Welcome, Ms. Cabral.
My name is Kathy Cabral. I live on 308 West Street. And I had another question, but there was something that was said earlier that I'm trying to wrap my mind around. It seems that we are being faced with a binary choice that the developer will get the zoning request that they've asked for, and they will annex to the city of Southport when they can build 1,500 residences. What I don't understand is why they won't annex if it's 900. And that's my question.
I don't think it's a binary choice. I think, like we said before, this is our plan. If there's a plan that works, that's better, that's why we're here. So it's not a binary. It's not a take it or leave it proposal. It's what can we do to make sense to incorporate the additional costs that'll be to annex into the city. There's some balance there. Do we want to have apartments? Do we want to have assisted living or not? It's okay. We just want to, that's why we're here. We want to get input as to what you all want to do. So it's not 1,500, take it or leave it. That's not what this is. That's our proposal. If there's some better proposals that we can work out with you all and the aldermen and planning, then that's why we're here. That's what we want to hear.
I'd like to emphasize on that once again, this is not our choice. This is your choice. And the gentleman who spoke just a moment ago, I agreed with everything he said. You know, you're going to have to, as a city, make a decision as to what is in your best interest, and that is what you should do. You should not do what we ask. You should do what's in your best interest, and we're all in favor of that. That's what we want. So the question is there a plan that you would like to have incorporated into the city of Southport that is a better situation and a better solution to you than the alternative? And the alternative is already set, has been for decades, is set as to what is going to happen on that piece of property in the near to intermediate term. Is there a better way to do that in working together in collaboration to try and get something that has more benefit to you than what currently exists? That's the whole question. And that decision is not ours, it's yours. It's totally yours. So the gentleman who spoke earlier, he absolutely nailed it as far as I'm concerned. This is up to y'all. I mean, we're not going to dictate this. We can't. Excuse me? No. There's no benefit to us in that. Well, don't let me try to tell you we're here just to improve the city of Southport. We're here to develop this property and make a profit on it. And if it's 900 homes, we'll do it just as responsibly. We'll do it just as responsibly and with just as much care as if it were in the city. But there's no upside to putting it in the city if there's not an enhancement that's in everyone's best interest. Why would we do that? That's not smart. But I mean, you know, the question is, can we come up with a plan that makes better sense for the city to incorporate this, or to do it as it's currently zoned and currently entitled? There's no benefit to us to putting it in the city in that case. We are not an eleemosynary organization. We are a for-profit organization. Whoever develops this land will also be a for-profit organization if it's not us. So there has to be a benefit to us as well. What we're asking for is a little more density and a little more flexibility. A little more density and well, if you don't want it, don't approve it. Exactly. We make more money annexing into the city with 1,500 than we make doing 900 staying in the county. Guilty as charged. But that's what's entitled now. We're here today to try and carve something out that is of benefit to you other than just doing that. Huh? Well, that's why we've got 6 more meetings. We've got two very serious impact studies coming about fiscal impacts. You know, I mean, you know, like I say, we're not here to lose money. We're here to make money. Guilty as charged. But we can.
Can I talk for a second? You're not making any friends, basically, but one quick question. We explain again, maybe Mr. Mayor, you should do this. What is the big benefit of us annexing into the city? And what I'm hearing from a lot of people that are here, they're not even in the city anyway, so they kind of don't care. They really don't care. So why would they want to have 1,500 homes? Because they're not even in the city. But please explain real quick, and I'll get off the stage. Well, Mayor, someone could explain. No, what's the benefit to the city? He's the mayor of the city.
No.
Somebody should explain to us.
I can explain the differences, but I'm here learning like everyone else, and if I can sum up what I have heard, and basically, and I did not want to interject myself in it, but if you would just like to hear the summary that I've ascertained right now, I will give that. The difference is 900 units versus 1,500 units. Now, I don't want to make it too simple, but that's part of it. And in the 1,500 units, there are, if Southport, if you want this, they've described low-income housing, apartments, assisted living, aging in place as part of that 1,500. If Southport doesn't want that, you don't have to have that. It is zoned partly PUD, where they could have 200 units, and the other part is R20, where they can have 700 units. So if not them, any developer who owns the land and meets the UDO and the general statute requirements and things like that we're going through right now, they can develop that land and not be in the city. If the city, the citizens feel like this is a good plan for the city, then they would be willing to annex in, so there would be some ad valorem benefit. If another developer comes in and develops the land as is, only the small PUD with the 200 units, will there be any ad valorem benefit? Those 700 homes can be built, and those people will access our city, our schools, our restaurants, our roads, and they will not have to participate in the tax base. So, I mean, that's the difference as I see it. And this is a learning process, and that's why I'm so grateful that we're all in the same room and that we're respectful of each other. And we're just trying to learn, but that really is how it comes down to, what do we want Southport to look like? Do you want that type of development here? But the bottom line is, someone can develop that land if it meets the requirements, and no one can develop it unless they do meet the requirements of the city for R20 and the PUD that is there. So it's either, and it's not either or, it's just there's two different possibilities in that regard. So that's the way I see it right now. And from a medical point of view, they talked about clinics and that type thing. So it's a very large project, and the more we learn, we work through it, the traffic and that type thing, we'll come to the right decision. We'll work through this together, and this is just the beginning of that process. And if we need another town hall meeting, we'll have another one. Be happy to, absolutely. Who has other questions? Why don't you come up so we can hear? Whoever would like to come up, please. Would you please come to the microphone? Oh, I know, but okay. We still have. Well, then go ahead. I'm sorry, ma'am. We gotta still have people on the list, Madam Clerk. You can, but. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one question. Are you telling us that we only have two choices? Either we pick one way or the other way? We don't have any other choices? We can't perhaps go through the law or the courts?
Ma'am, if you don't mind, would you state your name, please?
My name is Robin Mead. I live at 371 Champion Court in Southport, outside the city limits, on Robert Rourke.
The answer to that is, Chad has expressed on 3 different times tonight. I'll reinforce that. We are more than happy to talk about and work with the city on alternative proposals for this project that will still be beneficial to both of us, both the city and to us.
Well,
we're not precluding, we're not saying we have not said take it or leave it. We have not said that, but we've got to have a spirit. We have to have a spirit of collaboration and a willingness and an intent to work something else out if there is something else that would be satisfactory to the city.
Well, the only reason I say that is because you can't produce streets here. We live on a kind of a peninsula.
You know, that's an argument I can't defend or deny or refute, other than to say we've done the traffic study.
No,
with what we generate, plus the growth in background traffic for the next 20 years. And we have submitted that with the mitigations that are called for with that, with the intersection improvements, the street improvements that are called for, and the Department of Transportation in North Carolina has said that will be satisfactory and that they will approve that. Now, I can't make anybody in this room say, well, that's okay with me. It may be okay with you, it may not be okay with you. But we're going to do the things that are required to do to manage the traffic.
Well, I think we're going to have to do as well. We're going to have to handle ourselves and protect ourselves as well.
I'm sorry?
I think we're going to have to protect ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's
So
what we
clearly,
want to.
clearly.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Tim Turman,
Okay.
John Hedge,
Okay.
John Hodge,
Yeah, I don't believe they're here. Next.
Jeremy Warren,
Okay, Mr. Warren? Okay. He's not here. Next.
Ken and Bobby Harris,
Ken and Bobby Harris? Okay.
Terry Hunt,
Terry Hunt?
Chap Hatem,
Thank you for your stamina and staying. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Chap Haddon, and I reside at 6105 Turtlewood Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding the proposed increase in housing density at the Indigo Plantation property and its impact on the greater Southport community. Development is inevitable in most areas, and especially in an area as desirable as Southport. However, smart development is not any development. The proposal in front of the Planning Committee and Board of Aldermen creates an increase in density that would nearly double the population of Southport in a short period of time. With the additional development that has already been approved, such as Rob Gandy Road and across from the landing, the stress that such an increase that the Indigo Plantation proposal would create must be addressed well before the entertainment of said proposal for approval. Our community has significant hurdles to smart development that exist in its capital infrastructure, but even before that happens, we need a good vision. We need to understand what that vision is for the next 25 or 50 years. With that vision in mind, we can address the infrastructure issues with clarity. Where will the water come from? You can hook up Indigo Plantation, but can our county provide that water? How will the traffic be handled? As this will be the proverbial 10 pounds of something stuffed into a 5-pound bag, where will all the traffic go? Has there been a study? I asked before, and yes, there has. However, it is notably lacking in its ability to see the whole community. House Street is a 12-month issue now, and not just a tourist season, and traffic through Turtlewood to Rob Gandy Road is increasing substantially with hazards to the subdivision already. Are the streets rated from a construction aspect for the heavier traffic loads that they're going to see? I can guarantee you in Turtlewood they're not. They've fallen apart multiple times already. You've looked at some points of ingress and egress, but not the whole community. Are our evacuation routes substantial enough for the added traffic, not only from the Indigo Plantation proposal, but all the area that, including that's already been approved for development and still not built, as well as our neighboring communities? Can our development benefit not only those able to afford houses in this development, such as Indigo Plantation, but also those that are in the service industry that have very limited options in this area of Brunswick County? Is Southport able to sustain a full spectrum of housing needs and job demands? What are developers being charged to affect the needed infrastructure to support their plans? Do we have a fee requirement? How are they and any other developers held accountable for the needed updates that are outside of the actual development itself? And now, we've talked about some of the studies that are out there, and I'd like to see more of them, but before we proceed, how will we take all of them into account? We've seen clear advice given to the city previously, and I know it's not under this administration, where the Rob Gandy Road was placed. And they told them not to place it there, but because it was cheaper to place it where they did, Turtlewood now receives all the traffic that goes to the ferry coming off of Rob Gandy Road. I'm not opposed to development. However, I would prefer that our planning committee and the Board of Aldermen take a more careful and long-term approach to development, not being influenced by single points of development that might bring tax dollars to our coffers for day-to-day expenses, but leave us wanting with regard to infrastructure and having to raise additional funds. Doubling the size of the planned development Indigo Plantation needs to be properly addressed beforehand to remove the stress on our community before it can set itself in place for the future. This does not mean that at some time that development could take place. What it does mean is that we should allow smart development practices to benefit our community here in Southport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatem. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
That is all that I have signed up to speak, with the exception of one resident of St. James.
Here?
Terry O'Toole.
Mr. O'Toole? Okay. All right. Obviously not here.
I do have comments that were sent in if you would like for me to read them.
Okay, thank you.
The first one is from Catherine Huffham. She says, Southport, someone needs to ask the Project Indigo developer what they intend to do with the coal ash that came from Cogentrix that is under the old football field at Stevens Park, as it was once called. I was just told this evening that it is there, and if you take a shovel and dig down about a foot, you will know when you find it, which that was already addressed.
I think we worked with Ms. Kelly on that, so we are fully tied in with the city and with the state regarding the brownfields on that. That is designated a low-impact site, and we will follow exactly what the state requires there, coupled with coordinating with the city regarding its 7 acres of property that are adjacent to that.
The next comment is from Dr. Seth Deletsky. Since I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting, I would like to voice my opinion on the Indigo Phase 2. I am both a resident and small business owner in Southport. I am against the planned Indigo Phase 2 development. Any development that size will have serious negative consequences for our city and would be irreversible. Our roads are already far too congested at this point. Anyone traveling down 211 onto House Street towards town knows this already. Our infrastructure is just not there. Doubling the population of Southport is something that needs to be looked at seriously before pushing through a development of this size. Hopefully, we can look past the added tax revenue and use common sense that this project is not good for our community. Please say no to this development. We will lose the character of Southport forever.
Thank you. Anyone else, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir, I have one more. And it's from Mr. Wade Richardson, Smithville Woods resident on Robert Roark Drive. The first question he poses is, connectivity was mentioned several times at the original meeting. Indigo Phase 2 will back up too much of the Smithville Woods subdivision on the north side. And then he has 3 comments towards that. There is a single lot that connects Robert Roark Drive to Indigo Phase 2, shown on the presentation, master plan, and open space slides as the upper left inset. Would you be open to placing a pathway on this lot connecting Robert Roark to Indigo Phase 2 to provide connectivity for walking, biking, and golf carts, traffic similar to the pathway at the most northern end of Caswell Avenue? And the next comment is, this would allow recreational access towards downtown Southport for Smithville Woods residents without having to interface with the main entry intersection that will be closer to the stoplight with a massive amount of traffic, and would be a major safety improvement, as well as cutting down on vehicular traffic with more options for travel.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going back to the original Phase 1 of Indigo. Just so everybody knows, the Smithville Village covenants prevent any residential lots in Smithville Woods being used to access via vehicular traffic. Excuse me? That would be good to know. So what I would tell you is that the insert piece, we have, I think we own maybe 4 or 5 other lots within Smithville. Our feeling is this: if that's what the community wants, if that's what Smithville Village would like, then that's what we'll do. We've also talked, I've also mentioned to the folks of the county, to the extent that Smithville Village would like to hook up to our water and sewer or our infrastructure, and they need to use the lots that we own, we would make that an opportunity. So the answer is, to the extent that the Smithville Village HOA wants to have a path, great, we'll do it. But my understanding is we cannot use it to access vehicular traffic.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, has anyone else signed up?
Mr. Richardson had a second question, or a second comment. The second question is related to the Robert Ruark House Street intersection. The traffic impact study conclusion in section 7 states that construction of an addition left turn lane and a new right turn lane off Robert Ruark are needed. However, the NCDOT approval letter dated March 3rd states, it is understood that the right-of-way constraints will likely render the proposed roadway mitigations unconstructible. If the recommended lane improvements are not possible, how can we move forward with the density proposed? Indigo Phase 2 does not appear to have a direct connection to 9th Street without first turning onto Indigo Plantation Drive. So the majority of traffic going any direction except downtown will go to the Robert Ruark intersection that appears cannot be upgraded.
Would the traffic engineer like to speak to that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's a good question. So looking at the intersection there, Robert Ruark and Howell, according to Brunswick County, there's approximately 60 feet of right-of-way that's currently out there. Before anything would move forward, we'd have to do a full survey of that to determine where the property corners are. Even with the language that's proposed, there is an option that would move forward that would allow for the construction of those lanes. We would have to work with NCDOT to make that work. It could mean that there is some parking lot reconfiguration that needs to occur. If you look at the online aerial, it looks like the parking lot for the sandwich shop falls within part of the right-of-way that's out there today. Now, that could be just because of the aerial configuration, variety of different things. But there is 60 feet of right-of-way according to the county. And that is wide enough to get the 5 lanes that are there, in there, working with NCDOT. So it is something that we will have to do, to look at and to move forward if approved. If it's determined that we cannot do that, then we would have to come back with additional mitigation that would offset the impacts associated with the development that NCDOT would have to sign off on and approve.
And like I mentioned prior, the 3.5 acre tract that we own at the intersection, we will incorporate that into any and all DOT right-of-way issues that we have.
All right, I have one 3-minute block. Anyone likes, please? And you next after that. Please go ahead. State your name and address.
Hello, my name is Diana Mibelli. I live in 5995 Churchillwood, and I want to ask you, how many access does Southport have to get into from anywhere to Southport? How many access? How many?
Access points.
Right, there's 2.
2, okay. So can you imagine if there is a emergency, what's going to happen? We have Southport, we have Bullhead Island, and we will have 1,500 more houses. So we duplicate that in vehicles. What is going to happen? I am a proactive individual. I always like to think ahead of time. And the season is coming, so I am already trying to make plans in case. So what happened in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, with this situation? Are you proposing another access to Southport? So that we can evacuate?
Sure. No, there's not another crossing that would get in and out beyond 211 and 87.
Yeah.
I think the one thing to mention that hasn't been discussed too much is that NCDOT is widening and providing additional capacity on 211, which will help with emergency response. It will also help with hurricane evacuation. I know that's a serious subject. I live in a coastal community too, so we watch the forecast, and sometimes you don't know, sometimes you do know. and they do try to tell us ahead of time as much as they
Yeah,
possibly
but
can.
it-
I'm just stating
Yeah.
as well. So I understand your concerns.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome, David.
Hi, David Rhodes, 404 Burrington. My wife and I have been living here for about 6 years. And probably like a lot of people, we came here for the quality of life. We didn't hope that the city would one day become huge, that it would double. We didn't want 50 more restaurants and all the other things that we left behind that we really didn't need. And our quality of life with less services down here and places to spend money has been way greater than what we left behind. And we live in the New York City area. So when I hear the numbers tonight, I learned a lot, I appreciate it. So when I hear that right now you're allowed to build 900, you're asking for 1,500, so that's a 60% increase in the amount of people. And according to statistics, as of 2020, so there's 2.53 people per residence in United States. So 600 people would be about 2275, give or take. If we gave you what you wanted, 1,600, we're talking about 3,795 people. And that's more or just about what the town is here now. So when you think about, first of all, there's no more room downtown to develop as far as commercial services. And everyone who lives here, where do you go? Downtown. You don't say, oh, I think I'll go to Turtlewood, or, everything's down here. The restaurants are down here. And where does everyone go? American Fish, right? So if we have double the population, right now my wife and I, we were there Sunday at an off hour. We don't even go anymore because it's absurd. So I guess what I'm asking everyone is, the question is, so we could either let these gentlemen take the 900 and stay out of the city, or we could cut our own throats, allow you to do 1,600 and hasten the demise of what we came here for, which is quality of life. So putting aside the money and what we might benefit, and so far, there was a gentleman sitting over there that nailed it. So far, I haven't heard anything that's going to benefit us. I don't think anyone came here to buy real estate in Indigo Project tonight. So, it's great that you want to do an age, whatever, and yada, yada, but I'm not going to come there for that. And if we're talking about open spaces, look out the window here. I think we're pretty good with open space. I mean, I think most people have a very good time sitting in the Adirondack chairs out here. So I don't think it's anything for us. And one thing, and I don't mean disrespect to anyone in the town now, town council, and I really don't. You guys are hardworking, you put in a lot of time, but I think the town's being asked to decide something when we don't even know if there is, what the financial benefit would be for us to increase from that 9 to 1,500. So I don't even know how we could even discuss this topic when we don't even know what the pot of gold might be for us. So, it's kind of odd. We're asked to make a decision, or you gentlemen are, and we're missing some huge pieces because with all these people, we got to increase police, fire, and God knows what. And right now, if you flush your toilet, you hope it goes down and not back at you. And the last time, with the last major hurricane, Florence, how long was the water out for? 7 days, 9 days? So think of double the amount of people. So next time I go to Georgia to get out of the hurricane, instead of 9 days, I'll have to stay out of town 18 days because the population will double. So I guess the choice is, for what we came here, do we want to flush that down the toilet? Or hold these people feet to the fire and make them develop the minimum amount of residents as possible? I mean, they own the land. Someone's going to develop it. He's right. The gentleman's right. And you know what? He's here to make money, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's what business is for. But if our only hammer, and I guess it's our only hammer, is we're not going to take these people to court. We don't have money to take them to court. We never take anyone to court in Southport. But no, I don't mean it funny. It's just, you know, we have enough money to get by. But if our only hammer, and it is a hammer, is to hold them to the zoning, then it's about time we stand our ground and hold these people to minimum zoning. You know, pick your poison. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. And what great comments tonight. It is 8:30. I think we have had a excellent town hall meeting, and I appreciate everyone being here. I see someone's hand. Yes, sir. You know, we're it's 8:30. You know, I appreciate if you would send those comments in. Yeah, send those comments in or speak to one of the board members. But I think everyone is ready to go. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gandy. And I think we'll adjourn the town hall and readjust at another time. Thank you.